Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Welcome to our webinar here at the Ryonet headquarters here in Vancouver, Washington. I am Tala, and this is Ronald.
Hello.
And then Luke is with us as well, too.
Hey, how y'all doing? Howdy. Hello.
Hey.
So this is actually our first time doing one of the startup webinars, so really excited that you guys all signed up and got to join us today. We wanted to go into introducing ourselves, talk about what we do here, why we work here, what we like about the industry. Tala, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I started, about a year and a half ago. I actually spent most of my education in art school, part of it for high school, and then moved to San Francisco for a period of time and studied advertising. But anyhow, for a while after that, I became an entrepreneur on my own, and worked in the med spa industry for about like 5 years, and then worked with my family business, which was more of an e-commerce business, for another 5 years after that. And then, just about a year and a half ago, I found Ryonet, and I was like, gosh, this is such an awesome combination of everything that I've been doing. And now I work with a lot of startups and help a lot of people get started with screen printing, and I absolutely love it. So I'm excited to do this webinar and get to know you guys a little bit more.
Right on. Yeah, so again, my name is Ronald. Been here for about 4 years. I kind of got attracted to this place. I had a friend that had been working at the company basically since Ryonet started, and just told me about what he did, and it sounded like a fun time. I came in and saw the headquarters, met the team, and just felt like instantly attracted to what we do here. So been having fun. Favorite thing really is working with startups, people that have an idea, they need help getting it off the ground. What we do is, we're creative problem solvers. We help connect the dots, education first. So try to make sense of their idea in a way that we can actually help them launch it. So really excited for this webinar.
Yeah, definitely. And Luke, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit as well?
Sure. Well, my name is Luke Ryerkirk. I've been involved with Ryonet for about 10 years, a little over, and I started out as a customer. My company, we started the first screen printing company over 10 years ago. Bought all of our stuff from Ryonet, started going to trade shows and hanging out with the crew, and long story short, ended up working with them, and been working kind of with Ryonet specifically for close to 10 years now. And the biggest thing that really brought me towards this company was the education side of things, the overall just sharing of knowledge. And when I got the opportunity to help share that, it became a really big part of what I like to do. So sharing that knowledge and educating is a huge thing for me, and it's what keeps me motivated with all the cool things that we get to do at Ryonet. So there you go.
Awesome. Super cool. So I know when I'm talking to a customer, and I've heard Ronald on the phone before as well too, one of our main things at first that we want to try and do is get to know you. What are your strengths? What are your passions? Why are you wanting to get into screen printing? I'll give you an idea of a few different types of customers that we've worked with. There's some people, or that we talk to all the time. Some people are really heavy on the arts, which is awesome. They have a really strong artistic background and excel more in the logos and design portion. That's super helpful. There's other people that want to get into it because they see specific business opportunities right away. Say it's a stay-at-home mom that has a daughter on a volleyball team, and she's like, I know that I can build a business with this and really get into this market. So we try and listen to what your strengths are, what your dreams and your visions are, and then go from there and help you find the right fit.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting part, is like the beginning of the conversation we have with new customers, is finding out their why. Sometimes we've heard a story similar before. Sometimes it's something completely new, so it's refreshing. Kind of what Tala was saying, people see business opportunities. Some people just fall into screen printing. I feel like that's where a lot of people kind of come from, whether it's someone was doing the t-shirts for their son's basketball team, whatever, and then they decide they want to try it themselves, or kind of how Ryonet got started. You know, people are in a band, they want to make their own merchandise, they would want to try to do it themselves. It's a great place to start as well. So yeah, it's cool that people from all walks of life, you know, with all different types of business backgrounds, artistic background, I mean, just do it yourself people, jump into it. So yeah, getting to know that story really helps us sometimes even help them figure out, you know, what their path could or should be, you know, if they really want to get into screen printing. So the why, it helps us determine whether or not you're getting set up with the right stuff.
Mhm.
There are some cases where screen printing really isn't the best thing for what you want to do. You know, many cases where someone might be looking at a DTG printer, and we determine screen printing might be better for you, you know, or vice versa. So allowing us to get to know what your drive is, what your goal is, what kind of stuff you want to produce, that helps us, yeah, basically get you aligned with the right type of package. You know, depending on budget and your actual needs and what you need to do, there's so many different options that you can customize, and that's what we're here for as a team, to help educate you on those differences and make sure we're getting you started on the right foot, because it's no good for our business if you guys aren't printing and making money.
Absolutely. And one thing too that we have to get to know right away is what kind of space are you going to be in? Let's be honest, we don't all go into screen printing, renting out a big commercial space. A lot of the times it makes a lot more sense to be in your living room or your garage. So we can definitely help with footprint. I usually say on average, and depending on the press, but usually about 10 feet around the press. That generally gives a good like 3 feet or so of space to move around with your screen and all of that. And then your flash is going to kind of live in that same area, and depending on if you have a conveyor or not, you know, so on and so forth. So considering space, considering electric, we help you dial in those parts and answer those questions as well.
Yeah, so as far as space goes, kind of what you were just talking about, it can vary too. If you just want to print, you know, simple one color designs on a t-shirt, that's all your ambition is to get started. I mean, you can get a DIY press or a single color Riley press. And if you can't afford a flash and you just have to work in a closet, I mean, there's ways to make a little bit of space work, depending on what you want to do. But if this is something that you want to do outside of just a hobby and actually start a business or start a brand, whatever you want to do with it, you know, you would want to consider, like what you're saying, a bigger room to where you can actually have a press, you know, a suitable area for your flash to live. Hopefully you get to a point where you have a conveyor dryer if you're not doing that right away. So yeah, Luke, I mean, you've been doing screen printing a really long time. You want to shed some light and some experience on different areas that you've moved around with your print operation?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things that we really did when we first got into it was we looked at two major things: our budget, or three major things: our budget, what space options we already had, so we wouldn't have to go into somewhere, and what we wanted to do, not just right out of the gate, but kind of, you know, even a year or 2 years, 3 years down the road. And that last part is something that a lot of people miss. And I talk about that when I'm doing consultation calls and stuff a lot, because, you know, especially we talk about a budget and space. If you're wanting to grow a certain way, or if you're wanting to expand into a certain method of printing and such, or you think that's what you want to do, we can definitely help kind of confirm, okay, great. So with your budget and what you want to do, let's start here. So that then in 6 months, we're going to go there. And then in 6 months, we're going to go there, and so on and so forth. That's always been a big thing for me. And, you know, I kind of got bit when I first started. For instance, I also got too involved with too many different things. You know, we started out screen printing, and we did it out of the garage, which I love garage shops. Definitely throw in your questions about any type of garage shops that you guys have, or any troubles that you might be trying to figure things out. We're always happy to do that. But we started out as a garage shop, and we were just screen printing, and we got really good at it pretty quick. We got a name for ourselves, and then we started adding on all these other different avenues that started to take away a little bit of screen printing. So a big thing when we talk about space and growth is, you know, really doing it the right way. And a lot of us at Ryonet, especially a lot of the people who you'll be talking with, have done those things or experienced a lot of that. But yeah, the space factor is such a big thing. And if you have space readily available where you don't have to go rent something, that's going to be a huge help on keeping your overhead low. And with any new business, that's a really big thing. One side note too, make sure you guys are asking questions throughout this whole thing. We haven't had very many come through so far, so feel free, ask us questions, or also put in some comments on what you're looking to do or some things that you're kind of thinking about. If you think your question is dumb or whatever might be going through your head, it's not. There's at least, let's see, we've got almost 100 people on here, so there's at least 20 others that want to ask that same question. So go ahead and ask those questions as well. But yeah, a space is a big thing. Another little quick side note is when you talk about space, there's also that goldfish aspect. So when you do go to expand into something, really let us know what you're looking to do, because we can help plan out how that space is put together and organized and put a workflow together with you, because that efficiency is such a big thing as you grow. But starting out, yeah, if you can use readily available space, do it for sure.
Yep, right on. So yeah, as far as scalability goes with your press, depending on what your budget is and what your space is, a lot of people will look at this, they'll look at our options and say, hey, I want to get the smallest, most affordable thing. That's what's really awesome about our Riley Junior line. It actually allows you to get into printing, multicolored jobs with micro registration, at the best price you can really get into a press like that. So depending on, again, space, budget, the different configurations we have. Sorry, I kind of went off reading something. Where's it going with that?
I don't know. We can jump to the next one now
okay,
if you want.
Yeah. Anyways, tons of options.
Are there any questions right now? Does anybody have anything that they want to ask, or?
So far, it looks like you guys are hitting it really well. Don't have anything coming through just yet.
Okay. There's Sebastian.
Sebastian, what questions do we have?
Questions.
So Justin asked, what's a good setup for a garage shop?
That's a great question, Justin.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your garage shop?
Yeah, totally. So we actually just moved out of our garage shop, but we had basically a Riley 300 in there. We had a Vastex X3D because we were also doing digital in that shop. So something kind of similar where you have a Riley 300, you have a Riley Cure, you want a decent exposure unit, flash dryer, of course. That is a really good kind of core. A big thing to think about with your garage shop though is where are you going to wash your screens out in your dark room. We, in ours, actually kind of walled off a small area. You don't need a huge amount of space to wash things off and put that together. Really, with the garage shop, that's where our Entrepreneur Plus packages are a perfect fit because it kind of has everything all together. It's not too much stuff to where you're crammed, but at the same time, it's enough to have a good amount of equipment that is going to do well for you. It also depends what you really want. If you're selling to end users, if you're selling to other businesses and stuff, you want to make sure that you're getting into something like on a press, you want to press with micros. If you're just doing things for yourself and your friends and family, something like your DIY kits, something like that can be great. But as a garage shop, yeah, there are tons of awesome garage shops that are posting lots of phenomenal work out of them. And they're set up with something similar to that Entrepreneur Plus package type of thing that we have set out.
Yeah, I would say that a majority of the people that are looking at getting started up, that's where they start, is their garage.
Yeah.
So definitely very common. I mean, it allows you to kind of work from home, obviously. A little more flexibility, because there's a lot of people that get into screen printing, even with the $10,000 investment of, plus of a good startup. They're just doing it on the side. They already have a full-time job. So allowing them to do it, from the garage, learn kind of at their own speed, and take jobs on the weekends, after work, whatever it is definitely the jumping point for most people. So I'm sure many of you are probably in that same situation. Feel free to ask any questions about, what that looks like, what some people's struggles might have been. Yeah, anything.
I feel like we're kind of skipping around, but I think the natural kind of question after this is darkroom. So if you're looking at, setting up at home or in a garage, I've heard a few different stories where people have used their bathrooms or their closets to create a darkroom space. A lot of these packages do come with bug lights in them, which is also something that you can just go down to your hardware store and add more if you needed to, or call us and say, how do I get these? But yeah, what other stories have you guys heard in terms of setting up dark rooms at home and garages and all that?
Or any questions about it?
Yeah.
Sebastian, do we have any questions?
How big should a dark room be?
Okay.
That's a good question. Dark room should be big enough for you to at least be able to coat a screen. You know, pour your emulsion, have somewhere that the screen can actually dry, and then that can fit an exposure unit. So I have seen people, you know, even in their garage, right, they'll just partition off a corner of it by building, you know, actually framing some walls. You know, I'd say reasonably, Luke, what do you think, like 6 by 6 is enough space for a dark room?
Yeah, if your goal is to just expose and coat, absolutely. You know, I had a small little darkroom set up. It was about 6 by 10, and we even had a washout booth in there and a curtain that would we'd pull over whenever we'd be washing out screens and stuff. That worked out really fine.
Yeah.
When a big tip when you're putting together a small darkroom like that is definitely look at a drying cabinet or even kind of building one yourself. All that needs to be like I built one where we take one of our half racks and basically just slid it under a table and put a door on it. Okay, to where when that door was shut, it totally blacked out everything. Made sure that no extra spots of water or anything got into there. And we even took a little space heater and put it in to add a little bit of heat and kind of air movement. So when you're looking at a smaller space like that, you know, look at using every inch of that space. You can get a lot out of a really small darkroom.
Yeah, that's some other things that a lot of customers will use, and it does accelerate the drying process and just make a overall better screen. If you can also put a dehumidifier in there, and even a small box fan, kind of to the point of what Luke was saying, to circulate that air. So really you want to have humidity sub 35% is ideal, you know, for when you're actually having your screens dry. So it's pretty important too. I mean, that's the biggest part of how good, I think the biggest part anyways, of how well your shirt is going to actually look when you print it is the screen that you made for it. So the better you can do it, right, by doing things right, is going to basically set you up to have better prints, less headaches on pre-press setup, on, you know, your screen breaking down. A lot of things that you'll actually learn as you get started. You know, one cool thing, if you're the person for screen printing, is it's a lot of troubleshooting. You know, without getting taught or having some type of not internship, but like if you don't have a mentor that's going to show you all the right ways and you don't make it to one of our classes, you can watch videos, you can self-teach yourself, but you know, you are going to run into things that you have to learn how to fix and get around and troubleshoot. So the darkroom, I know for some people can be daunting. You know, you're working with some chemicals, you're working with exposing, you know, a stencil with light. It's very abstract to some folks that never took photography or, you know, don't have an understanding before screen printing of how emulsion works. That's another thing that we're always here for too. So if you do have questions when you do get your stuff and, you know, you're getting set up, we have a success line that you can call Monday through Friday. It's 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Then we also have chat if you're just on the website and you don't want to call in, same hours. You can always send us an email. And then, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great communities already built around screen printing, which we have some groups, you know, the Ryonet band. There are a handful of other forums on Facebook. So cool thing about this community, I think, is the willingness that people are actually wanting to help, you know, other screen printers that are jumping into it. I get on the forums and I see a lot of people asking questions, you know, apologizing, hey, this may be a silly question, but then I normally see a lot of people jumping to answer the, you know, these people's requests. So I think that's super cool and empowering, right? So yeah, no silly questions.
Yeah, definitely not. And we also have some really great classes too. So yeah, we can definitely help you guys out with that when we get people started, a lot of the times will like to just put you in a class and definitely be your point of contact, you know, for a while as you get settled. But I'm super surprised how many people don't call and go, for one, how do I put this together? It's really with the arms, that's one thing to kind of cover. You're probably wondering, like, how would this come? What would setup be? You really just need to assemble the arms for the presses, and usually between 1 or 2 people you can do that on your own. And then a lot of the times I'm just surprised how quickly people pick it up. And I would say the biggest pain point or the hardest learning curve really is exposing the screens at first. But once you get that down and get that dialed in, you put your sticky note on the wall and you're like, okay, this is my recipe. This is what I'm going with. And then you can experiment as you want to from there. But yeah, it's awesome seeing people get up and just get rolling.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So another thing that we want to talk about is artwork. Kind of goes hand in hand with the screen creation, and that's obviously very important too. So there's different types of artwork, right? Some people, they think they want to screen print, you know, a photo that they have, where, you know, there's 2 different ways you can set up your artwork. There's, you know, raster based, and then there's vector based. Raster based is if you were to take a photo, there's JPEGs, right? There's pixels. So not ideal for, you know, spot process or spot printing, spot color printing. And there's vector, which is, you know, basically true lines. It's, you know, you take spot objects, fill color that you can basically manipulate, change. I mean, Luke, you'd probably be better to talk about this than I would, and probably than Tala would, since you do the art pretty often. But I'm trying to explain the difference between raster and vector and
Spot process.
Yeah, getting set up with those things.
Yeah, so really it kind of comes down to 2 things. Of a raster image is just a picture, right? So when you take a picture with your phone or with your nice camera or anything like that, that picture is made up of thousands of tiny little squares, right? And the major difference between a raster image versus a vector graphic is when we blow up a raster image bigger, the squares don't just multiply. The squares get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's why your images will look blurry, or they call it dithering and pixelated. Versus when we look at a piece of vector art is really just a mathematical equation. You draw a line, and in that program like Illustrator and Corel, as you make that line bigger or that image bigger, the ratio or the mathematical equation is also getting bigger. So that's why we can take something like a logo and we can print it as a left chest, or we can print it on a billboard and it looks perfect and pristine. That clear edge is why you want to stick with vector graphics. The mass majority of screen printing is done with vector graphics. So your major 2 options when we talk about programs for that is going to be Corel and Illustrator. They're very, very similar. The real difference why you might want to go with Illustrator over Corel is if you're a Photoshop user or if you like to take pictures and you're comfortable with that aspect of it. Illustrator and Corel work very well together, and Illustrator and Photoshop, excuse me, work very well together. You can use Photoshop to do a lot of your screen printing separations and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, to make things as easy as they can be, I personally recommend people sticking with vector graphics. So that's really going to be your Corel Draw or your Illustrator. It really makes things very simple. The reason why it makes things simple is because we can also, when we go to print things, if we have 2 colors, for instance, a red and a yellow, it's really easy to separate those colors out, because when we make our film, which our film then goes to our screen, we want to make sure it's easy to where we only print what is yellow on one film and then what is red on another film. When we deal with raster stuff, that can be a little more difficult at times. It's just a different way of looking at it. So sticking with vector is going to be your best friend for sure. And the mass majority of especially popular designs out there are done in vector graphics a lot these days.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Sebastian, do we have any questions that we should answer?
Yeah, so on artwork, how can you appropriately size an artwork so it doesn't look abnormal and shrink as the garments grow in size?
Okay, so you mean in terms of sizing the garment for the shirt? Like, so if you have like a XXX, making it bigger, or a youth size, making it smaller?
Correct.
Okay. So I think you're gonna make two different, well, you're gonna burn two different screens for that then. Unless you're on a direct to garment, then your RIP software would auto adjust that and change the size of that image. But otherwise, if you want an image that's, a different size, you're just gonna have to, like, unfortunately, burn two different images, two different screens with that same image that's a different size.
Yeah. So people do it a number of ways. Like what she was saying, some people will burn a smaller image for, extra small through medium, and then, they might size it up for a large through like XX, 3X, however big you're going. So there's a couple ways you can do it. Depends on what the image is, if it's an all over print or if it's just, standard logo. Some people will just keep it one size that fits all technically.
Yeah.
So, it kind of depends on the size of film output you're using too. If you're using, a 13-inch wide film, you can't really go even that full 13 inches, and you probably wouldn't want to anyways, because 13 inches is pretty big. And I'm a medium, so the biggest print that I'd probably put side to side is, probably 11 inches. Luke, did you hear the question about sizing? If someone wants to use, was it a logo or a picture, or was it a full print? Okay, well, someone asked a question about sizing your artwork, for different runs. Let's say you're doing a run of extra small through XXL. Do you think that people more often make two different screen sizes for the smaller runs than the large?
No, they definitely don't, especially when we're talking about screen printing. Now, of course, it will depend on the quantity, but your average, adult order, which we'll call that small or extra small up to 2XL, you're not going to make an extra screen or different size for that. 11 to 13 inches wide is the norm. In my shops over the years, I've barely printed above 12 inches wide on standard stuff. When we get above 2XL, sometimes that image cannot look proportionate to the shirt. So certain customers, certain end customers who you're printing for will request a bigger image. So that's something that really I personally stay away from, but I also leave it open. If a customer wants that option, then I can give that to them. I am going to charge extra for it. Now, another way to look at it is what happens when someone comes in and says, I want this design on these adult shirts and I also want them on youth. That is going to be treated with two separate sizes of a design, 99% of the time. So that will be treated as such, and how you price that out will depend on how you want to do it. But yeah, for your standard orders, adult size small to 2XL, sticking 11 to 13 inches wide is going to be fine. I personally stick with 11 on the mass majority of stuff, barely print above 12. So.
Yep, right on. Thank you.
Nice.
So some more questions that I'm seeing, you're asking, does all this work on a regular outlet? That's a good question. Depends on what you have. So we do have options that will work on a standard 120 volt outlet, North America. Really, it's going to come down to your conveyor dryer in most cases, and or your flash. So most of the conveyor dryers that we have for like a home size shop, would work on a 20 amp circuit, 240 volts. So depending on the age of your house, you likely have that kind of power supply available. Whether or not you need to run it already or like have an electrician come out to split it so you can run it in the garage or what have you. I mean, yeah, things can work on a 110 or a 120, but it does limit your offering for what you can choose as far as conveyor dryers go in flash. All of the exposure units that we sell, for home use I think they're all 120.
They're all 120, yeah.
Yep. Your printer is the other thing that you would want to plug in. That's, again, just standard. Yeah, any other lighting really is standard. So it's a good question, though. That's something that we have to ask, as we're getting to know where the customer wants to print. There have been times where someone placed an order online without calling in, which is fine if you want to do that. But they got their conveyor dryer and they were in a really old house. They were in a basement that they were renting where they couldn't do 240 volt power supply. So you know, it was a little bit of a disruption to their getting started, you know, where we had to do some exchanges and everything. So definitely call in if you're not sure about your power or space, anything really.
Right.
Let's see. Is there a formula for sizing? Not sure.
You need to refresh because I already answered that question.
Oh, good job, Sebastian.
Okay. So do you want to throw some questions out there, Sebastian, since mine is not refreshing?
So what are the different print locations on a shirt for long sleeve pants? And what about marking the pallets for these?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so we have on the template, we have like left chest, right chest. We also have a really cool laser system too, if you really wanted to get crazy with your registration, that you could add to your junior 300 as well. But yeah, as far as burning the screen, there's that template that helps with like left chest and right chest, and you know, helps you register your image where it needs to be on that screen.
Yeah, so pre-registration template will definitely help you out with the pre-press work, making sure you're getting your artwork set, you know, where you should on the screen so it lands on your plat and it's in the ideal spot.
Mm-hmm.
Luke, do you have anything to add to that?
Nothing really crazy. I mean, when we're talking, I'm sorry, I'm answering a bunch of these questions here as well. But we're talking about the different placement locations, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The biggest thing that you can run into an issue with is everyone calls left chest something different. Everyone calls center chest crest or something crazy different. So the biggest thing that I put out there is really two things. One, standardize it in your shop and what you want to offer and what you call it. And two, when you're talking with a customer, make sure and confirm, hey, when you say back yoke, what exactly are you wanting, just to confirm? Because to me, that's a 3-inch by 3-inch logo on the back of the shirt at the top of the collar. You know, like just being extra, making sure that you're having extra information so you can kind of confirm that. Because the worst thing is someone says, I want X, and you end up misinterpreting that, and then they say, no, it's wrong. Well, your definition is technically one thing and their definition is another thing. So neither one of you are wrong, but it's just a communication thing. So I try to over communicate, especially with new customers when we talk about different locations. That's my big point of view from it.
That's a really good point.
I have a random tip kind of going off of that too, and this might sound bad, but people will ask me if I think that they should do Pantones starting off, and usually I say don't get yourself into that if you don't have to with your customers, and other people might disagree. But it's just one of those things that it takes a long time to mix them, and then once you get that specific with your customers and have to get that specific again, it's nice if you can just, you know, go off of a pre-mixed ink. But of course, that's up to you. That's just my recommendation starting out, that you don't commit yourself necessarily to that right out the gate.
Mm-hmm. I want to answer a question. Someone asked, does Tala have Bailey's in her coffee?
Smell it.
No, it's just coffee.
It's just my personality.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. So another thing we can jump into, right? Garment selection. You know, when getting to screen printing, there's different nuances going from printing on 100% cotton to tri-blends or, you know, other synthetic blends. So it does take some learning on like what kind of ink you should use on 100% polyester versus 100% cotton, what the cure temperature is of those different inks. Synthetics, like 100% polyester, for example, is going to scorch at a lower temperature. So when you're using a standard Plastisol ink, they usually cure about 320 to 340 degrees, where a lot of polyesters, when you get it up to that temperature, you know, you'll actually scorch it. If you don't scorch it, you know, you'll probably run into dye migration, because over 300 degrees, you know, that dye in your shirt is going to basically turn into a gas and come up into the ink. So let's say a red polyester shirt, you know, you have your white team logo on it. Standard Plastisol, you run it through the dryer or your flash up to 330, 40 degrees to get it fully cured. Well, you'll notice that, you know, maybe you don't see it right away, but in the next 48 hours, that white ink could turn pink. or if it's on a black shirt, it could turn gray. So being mindful of what you're printing on, who you're printing for, just the different nuances between those things is definitely something you want to, kind of know before you jump into committing to a job that you don't have the right stuff for.
And generally, you're pretty set until you get up to that really high threshold of polyester with that. And at that point, probably give us a call and say, hey, what ink should I be using with that? And we can help you through those first, few trial periods and everything. Like on a nylon windbreaker, for example, you would want to use something that we refer to as a hugger catalyst to kind of strip that top layer there and make it, more printable, and then a top score low cure ink like Ronald was describing. So when you do get into those really, really plasticky high polyester garments, just know that there is going to be a specific type of ink and process for that. And we could talk about water-based printing a little bit too in terms of the garment. That's definitely.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about, just real fast, Plastisol, because we did put out a new ink, F and Ink. I know you guys have probably seen that and wondering, well, what is it? It's new. We haven't seen it. It is an awesome go-to Plastisol ink, ready for use colors. It's a low cure, which is cool. I believe it's 260 degrees. So definitely a great ink to try out if you guys are getting into this. And then Wilflex, yeah, it may be overwhelming if you look at the ink line, if you don't know a lot about it, because there's the standard lava line, which is ready for use colors that you can just print with out of the bucket, and that cures at the standard temperature of 340 degrees, or 340, yeah, okay. And then you have top score, which is going to be for your synthetics and athletic wear, your performance wear. That's curing at 260. Those are ready for use colors as well. And then there's the Rio system. So if you see a color you really like and it says, Wilflex Rio, just know that that's actually a component of a mixing system. So the Rio is basically a kit that you would get if you wanted to do custom Pantone matches and color matches, to where you'd plug in whatever Pantone that is in the formula finder, and it would basically tell you the recipe of what components you need to use, how much of each component to make that exact color. So again, that's another low cure option, and that pretty much covers it for our Plastisol inks. And then if you want to talk about the water base.
Yeah, so gosh, that's one of the main things with people starting out. They're like, should I do water based? Should I do Plastisol? A lot of our kits come with both, and generally I say experiment with both and see what you think. Between the two, there are going to be differences with the screens, which we didn't really touch on there, but again, we can help you more with that. I would say the easiest way to kind of break that down is the thinner the ink, the higher the mesh count you're going to need for your screens. And then it kind of goes by color as well too. I'm kind of jumping around to the screen thing. But so a white ink is going to be a lot thicker and a lot harder to push through the screen. So generally you're like with a white Plastisol ink looking at like a 110 mesh or like 156. 156 is very versatile and will work with a lot of different types. Once you start getting up into the water-based inks, they are thinner and you'll be going higher in your mesh count, especially if you're working on really detailed artwork. So yeah, all the way up to like 280 or like maybe 305 at the highest with that. But going back to water-based inks, you're going to have a much softer hand with them, especially after you wash them, but they are a little bit more difficult to dry and cure as well too. So I say warp drive like crazy with that, unless you have some really huge specific conveyor for water base. Even with our Riley Cure 8-foot, great dryer, you're still going to want to use warp drive with that, with the 8-foot or the 5-foot, and then you'll be set. You can't even just flash and cure with that. You just want to make sure that you're getting good airflow with it. And I always say with any job, your first few jobs, if you're switching ink or cure temps or anything, make sure that you do a washout test before you give the 200 shirts to your customer or even print the 200 shirts so that you don't waste the garment.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to make sure that your cure temps are right and that image isn't washing out.
Test prints are You need to do them. I mean, even if you've been printing for a long time, it's still ideal to protect your money, right? Especially jumping into it when you're learning these things. So yeah, if you were to print 200 shirts, that ink's already on the shirt, you give it to your customer, washes out, that's not good for your brand, your business, or the customer. So
Stinks.
yeah, taking that time to really dial in the process, know that this ink needs to be cured for this long on my dryer underneath the flash, at this temperature, is going to set you up so you're running into less failures and mistakes with ink washing out. So definitely a good point to touch.
And I would say between the two, like one of the main things that you're going to notice is a big difference in curing water-based versus Plastisol. But you also have a really awesome advantage of having that really soft hand, low profile ink output on the shirt. So if you have a customer that's like, I want this shirt to feel as natural and not inky as possible, you're going to want to, if it's worth it for you with that customer, kind of go a little bit deeper in the water-based zone. And we have a good online course for that as well. And we should probably do a webinar about that on its own at some point, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone asked,
one question that also came through about water-based ink that I wanted to point out. Water-based ink is, you want to consider it an active ink, meaning when you put it on the screen, let's start printing with it right then. Where Plastisol, we can put some on and we can walk away, come back and finish the job. So kind of know that getting into water-based ink, that when you start printing, let's print the job, let's finish the job with the ink in the screen. And because when we take that screen off, we want to go ahead and reclaim it and get it done.
Yeah. One thing that was shared with me when I first started trying to do water-based printing when I worked here was keeping the ink hydrated. So a lot of people will keep just a water bottle. They can lightly mist their ink every 30, 40 shirts or whatever needed, right? If you live in a place that's really hot and dry, Arizona, the garage door's open, you're printing, probably have to use a little bit more, but making sure, to Luke's point, that you're keeping that ink moving and hydrated it's a must, really. So yeah, I mean, printing with water-based over Plastisol, being active, it does take a little bit more attention. The cleanup is easier, which is one thing that I appreciate about it. Since it is water-based, you have to use fewer chemicals actually to break down the pigment and the water, or sorry, the ink from your screen. However, if you aren't keeping that screen moving or that ink moving, or you don't pre-flood, then you can run into some issues. Basically, it'll dry up in the screen if you don't flood your screen to where the pigment gets locked in between the mesh, and it's going to cause, pretty much it could ruin your screen. You're going to have that locked image from the pigment being locked in there. So when you go to wash it out, it's ghosted. There's like a haze on your screen where, it'll actually affect the next prints that you try to do if you don't get that completely out when you go to reclaim the screen. Plastisol, the cleanup, like what Luke said, you don't have to do it right away. You can come back the next day, keep printing, but you do have to use, an actual ink degrader, something that's going to break down the binders in the Plastisol ink to get it off the screen, off your squeegees, off your spatulas. So yeah, there's pros and cons about printing with water-based or Plastisol, depending on what you want to do, how you want your shirt to feel. Yeah, so
yeah, I always tell people that Plastisol ink will collect bugs before it dries out.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, if any of you guys do any painting or have painted with oil-based paints, it's similar. It takes a long time to dry, right? And with the ink itself, printing, on t-shirts, you have to actually get it to that cure temp, right, in order for it to bind and cure, or else it'll wash out. So no matter how long you let it sit. Something I saw here is for printing on posters, water-based is preferable. In most cases, it depends on what you're printing on, what that poster is made out of. If it's an organic material, then yeah, water-based would be the way to go. I know that some people do use Plastisol. I'm not sure how well that actually works. Luke, do you know about printing with Plastisol and flat stock?
It's pretty tough because the problem that you have with Plastisol, no matter what, you have to heat it up, right?
Yeah.
So the issue you have is where the temperatures we need to bring it to and the amount of dwell time we need to use for Plastisol, typically we'll start to scorch, or even worse, set the piece of paper on fire. So do not use Plastisol. Let's stick with water-based. water-based is a better option than traditionally it's a better option for smaller shops, especially than traditionally what's used is solvent-based ink, which can be very caustic. A quick thing too, if you're going to be doing printing on paper using water-based ink, using like our warp drive to speed up the drying process will also help.
Right on, thank you. That's the cool thing though about getting into screen printing. Even if you get a press, you know, with the idea, hey, I'm just going to print t-shirts, you're not limited to just printing t-shirts. So that's pretty cool. You can print, you know, postcards, wedding invitations, you know, flat stock of all kinds.
Skateboards. I helped somebody get started with that.
Yeah, I have a handful of customers that buy this stuff just to print on wood signs. I guess there's a pretty big market for that right now. So, you know, printing custom wood signs. I mean, you can get pretty creative, which is a cool thing.
Boxes and packaging too, actually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can basically push your brand even further if you wanted to do custom packaging. You know, if you're going to be doing mailers or boxes, you know, you can basically put a design with your logo and all that on the actual box that the customer, you know, receives. And that's a big part of branding is like the total experience, you know, from when the customer receives their item, right? From the way that they open the box, right? The way it's packaged, all of that actually has an impact on your brand. So just cool that you have the tools, you know, even with a basic press to do that stuff.
Can you guys talk about the storage of inks?
Yeah. So the storage of inks, gosh, I see some awesome shops that have, it's cool if you can do your own like built-in shelf so that you can see everything and, you know, organize it however you want to. But I would say definitely with water-based for sure, make sure that lid's on super, super tight. But yeah, you can, I would say build little shelves and a little, you know, shelving system where you can see all your colors. They're beautiful.
Yeah, so, sorry, go ahead. Well, with water-based, you know, you definitely want to make sure that you got the lid on super tight, right? Water escapes, it evaporates. So that's going to help set you up so you're not running into, you know, opening up this container of the water-based ink and it's dry or fluffy or hardened. So yeah, a cool, dry place, cap all the way on tight. Plastisol, again, you know, having lids on tight period is good practice, but you just want to make sure you're not getting any dust or debris in there. So,
right.
What were you going to say about the storage, Luke?
Yeah, one of the things with the storage, someone actually asked this, is when we talk about the temperature of the room. We're coming into winter now, and so especially for garage shops, if it's not heated or the heat's not turned on at night, if it's getting, you know, below 30, 35 or 30 degrees, we definitely want to bring ink and emulsion, especially inside. Also know if ink is being stored under 50 degrees, you're always going to end up needing to stir it a little bit more. That's especially sure with Plastisol. Plastisol freezes at a much lower temperature than water-based, of course, but just if you're printing in an area or in a shop that does not have heaters in it and is not consistently being heated, look for a place to put your ink and emulsion where it's not going to get below freezing, preferably.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, you mentioned mixing up the ink. That is something that I've had to help a lot of new customers kind of realize how important it is with the Plastisol. There's different brands of Plastisol, you know, and different makers. They have different properties. With the Wilflex, you know, it's a was it fixotropic? Is that the actual like scientific term for it, Luke?
Yeah, it's got a better thixotropic aspect to it, is the best way to put it. What you have to understand is Plastisol ink, if you look at it under a microscope as an example, it's microscopic plastic balls, right? And so when you're stirring, those particles are rubbing together, creating heat, which then makes those particles or those balls relax. Okay, that's why when ink is cold or straight out of the canister, sometimes it can feel a lot thick. Versus as you're printing with it in the screen, like, oh, it starts to loosen up. It's rubbing those particles together and allowing it to relax. So that's where stirring is really needed for Plastisol.
Yeah. So heat makes printing, in most cases, especially Plastisol, a lot easier. So not just having your ink actually mixed up really well and warm, but your platens as well. That's another thing that helps, your prints come out a lot nicer. So good practice is, before you actually set up your job, actually have each platen sit under the flash, not for very long, but, rotating it under just to get them kind of warmed up before you actually go to print and put on your adhesive, or before you actually go to print. You should already have your adhesive on there at that point. It's also going to make the adhesive a lot more active, a lot tackier, which in turn is going to help you out. So yeah, just some good tips is keeping everything warm.
That effing ink actually too is amazing for colder weathers, colder temps, just because it does have a lower viscosity too. So you are going to be able to push that through a screen easier. And the white, for sure, white can be a really big pain as it gets colder, just getting that moving. It just tends to thicken up and be harder to work with. So I recommend, if you're having that issue and you're using lava, try the effing ink with that, because it's going to be just easier to move.
Yeah, it's pretty effing easy to use. I like it a lot.
Pretty effing cool, guys. Cool. So one thing that we want to talk about is, when you do order from us, how does this stuff arrive, right? Do you need to hire a mechanic to come put it together? No, hopefully not. That's the cool thing. Depending on what you order, all of our presses are going to come partially assembled to where you just need to do the finish assembly. If you're ordering a multi-station junior press, it's going to come in a crate. Everything comes bolted down. All you would have to do, basically, let me try to show, is finish attaching these legs to the base, right? Basically bolt on the print arm. So if you have a 2-station press, you're just putting 2 print arms on. 4-station, 4, 6, and so on. So pretty simple. I mean, each of these print arms only have 4 bolts, so doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't take many tools. I'd say with the junior series, you're probably safe to have 1 person building it. With the Riley 300s and the senior series, the 350, it's a bigger press, a lot more weight. There's a few extra pieces you need to tackle. Yeah, I mean, that could take a couple hours. If you have a friend, it shouldn't be a hard task. The last part of the finish assembly is the print head. So to ship this, we don't have the springs in, we don't have this top bumper bolt. Basically, these print heads are folded up. So to finish this assembly, all you're doing is pulling down, the print head. You're going to put the springs in, pull the print head down, and then put the top bumper bolt through, which will allow it so it doesn't, go up any further than that. So yeah, really, I mean, putting the press together, a junior shouldn't take you more than an hour. A 300 or 350 shouldn't take you more than a couple hours at most.
I think we do those in like 15 minutes at trade shows, just with 2 people.
Feels like 15 minutes. Yeah, it's pretty fast though.
Yeah.
And we've done it a handful of times. So
yeah, it's not bad at all.
The other stuff, the flash, that comes again. It's just a stand that you put together. A pole, either 2 or 5 legs, depending on what you get. So again, you're just basically putting in bolts through holes, tightening it up. Pretty straightforward. Exposure units come fully assembled. Washout booths take some finish assembly, really easy. The screen racks, that's one thing that you do have to put together. It's kind of like an IKEA piece of furniture. We have the instructions. Again, it's nuts and bolts. You're putting things together and tightening it up. So the goal is to make it so that you can be an everyday man, woman, whatever, right, with limited tools, being able to put this together, appropriately. And again, we're always here. If you have questions during that assembly, we're pretty technologically advanced. We have iPhones, so we can FaceTime and show you guys how to do things if you get stuck. Yeah, so don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions about that.
One big question.
Pictures and videos. Oh my gosh, yeah, please send pictures and videos too and have those available. That helps the team so much. Get you an answer quick. Sorry not to jut in there.
No, that's okay.
No problem. One question that I always get a lot before we ship things out is this 300 or this 350 going to fit through a doorway? Great question. Yes, it will. It just takes a little bit of moving it on its side and kind of walking it in. Another thing that I like to cover with people too is shipping. We always make sure that there's a lift gate with residential and everything so that there's not an issue with that. But freight companies are weird. Sometimes the driver will be awesome and he'll want to bring it in for you and do all of that work. And other times they're like, it'll be raining and they're like, we're dropping this off right here. We're not moving it any further.
Yep.
So I recommend if you are getting a big shipment, probably see if you can borrow a hand truck or something like that. So once it is off the truck, you can move that easy.
Yeah, and so for delivery, and really all they're required to do is get it to roadside, right, and drop it off. So any further accommodations, let's chat about that and see, what kind of advice we can offer for you.
Hand truck.
Hand truck, yeah, hand trucks are nice. Warranties. So good thing about the Riley Hopkins, it has a limited lifetime warranty. Really, the only thing that's limited on it is, these plastic knobs, if they crack because you're wrenching down on them super tight over the years. These springs, which is a wearable item, over the years, they can also, pop or snap. The platens, since they're made out of wood, it's a wearable item, other than that, these things are built like a tank. They're actually built here in the building we're in Washington State. So we do everything from the metal fab, design, basically everything except for the powder coating, for now at least. So assembly, we make sure that everything is calibrated, before we actually ship it out. The team assembles it fully, make sure, the print arms are level, make sure everything lines up perfectly, run it through the rings, and then we take off the print arms so that you can just finish the assembly, we can pack it up and send it to you. Limited lifetime warranty on our presses. Pretty much anything that we manufacture, we're gonna take care of you.
Yeah.
If something comes up, give us a call. We will do what we can to make it right. It's not often there's an issue with an actual press just because of the way it is built. But yeah, you're pretty much safe with issues that you would have, I guess, at any point with us.
I do tell people just to kind of give them a heads up, because honestly, we don't have issues with the presses, surprisingly not with the heat elements either. The flashes, the conveyors last for a very long time as well. We rarely ever get customer service calls on any of those things. I would say your biggest pain point throughout screen printing in general probably will be, in terms of equipment, your film output. Just every 3 years or so, you're probably going to have to replace that printer, and it's just kind of nature of that beast. But other than that, the press is a hunk of steel and it's going to last longer than all of us, basically.
Yeah, so I know it's nearing the hour. We just hit 10 o'clock. We started a couple minutes late, so we can run a couple minutes longer. I wanted to answer, a couple more questions. Luke or Sebastian, do you have any that are popping out?
Yeah, there's tons. We're gonna bang it through them. Sebastian, you got one you want to bring up?
I think the dark room got a lot of good feedback and questions. One that just came up is a water filtration system. Is that recommended?
Yeah, so we have a filtration system. I recommend it for, you don't want to have to break ground with your pipes. You're going to have some gross chunks of emulsion, all of that. And so either investing in a filtration system like the one that we have and having that recirculate back into itself so you can recycle that water is a super cool way to do that. Worst case scenario, if you're not going to start off with that, you could always put a drum underneath your washout booth, because the washout booth is just going to have a little hole. So that wherever that's going to go, it's going to go somewhere, so you can have it drop into a drum and have that hauled off. Every so often too, if you're on a septic tank, you're going to want to be really cautious about what's going into your system. Any other thoughts, you guys?
Yeah, filtration system is definitely recommended. I mean, if you care about, the water system, your property, definitely recommended. You're printing with things that have solid byproducts. So, when you are ready to get out, you're cleaning your screen, there's going to be stuff that's going down the drain that's either going to harden, in the pipes or somewhere, or just chemicals and things that we don't want going down that we can, reduce what's going on and reduce that impact. So,
yeah.
Something we're really big on, especially focusing, from mid 2019 and forward, is this objective we have, Project 376. You can learn more about that on our website, on our forum. You can just type in Project 376 in the search bar, and there's tons of information about it. So I advise actually learning a little bit about what our objective is with that. So trying to make less of an impact on the environment.
Definitely.
All right. Some other questions. I'm trying to bypass coding cap film. So cap
Someone
film.
asked, oh, go ahead.
Well, Luke, I was actually going to ask you, I've never used cap film myself. I've sold it to a handful of customers, but since I've never used it, you know, what's the benefit of that?
Benefit of capillary film can be a couple things. One, if you don't want to get into coating your screens, or you're just starting out and you don't have a space to do that, capillary film will replace the need to coating screens. And two, a little bit better of a use of capillary film is when you're wanting to do like high density printing and you need a really thick stencil. Capillary film can be sold in different sizes, but those two things are the really big process of using that, or reasoning for using capillary film. It's very important to follow the steps provided on applying that capillary film. And while you are, able to kind of skip the step of coating the screen, your film that you printed out that you're going to be using to expose is still just as important as if you were coating a screen. A big issue that a lot of people have is they get capillary film and then they're trying to expose a piece of film that is not printed out very well, and then they just have all kinds of issues. So you apply the capillary film correctly, you have a good film of your design, and you'll have a successful print typically.
Thank you. I see a question here that actually I wanted to answer earlier too. What's the difference between the Riley Junior and the Riley 300 or senior presses? It's a great question. While the Riley Junior can definitely get you started on a slimmer budget, it does still have the XY micros. It still does have multi-station to where you can be printing pretty good production. The main difference is the senior presses, so the 300 and 350. They have a more advanced print head. So when it comes to doing your off contact, right, your registration, all that stuff, the tilt, it's all tool free. And the adjustments are actually more micro, more fine. So being able to do the off contact and tilt, I know when you're just getting started, that can be very frustrating, right? Having to loosen a couple bolts, shimmy the screen to where you think you need it, right? Put something in between the platen and the screen, and then tighten it down to think you have the right off contact just to see that you don't. That can be a struggle. With the 300 and 350, it definitely is going to save you a lot of time in setup, because instead of having to loosen some bolts, shimmy things around, really it's just the twist of a dial on the top of the print head that is going to adjust the height off of the platen. So very easy to dial in. Same goes for the tilt. It's the turn of a knob, and it's going to slightly adjust how tilted it is. So yeah, you definitely get a lot more, I guess, technology, if you want to call it that, out of the 300 and 350. You have an advanced registration gate, so instead of having these nylon bolts that is technically a wearable item, it'll wear down over time as the registration block hits it, you are going to be falling into a bearing gate registration. So it's a bit smoother. It feels like almost like it locks in just perfectly. So yeah, those are definitely some benefits of it. Yeah, the 350 comes standard with aluminum platens, which is nice. What else? The 350 actually has a totally different print arm. It's almost the same press as the 300, but the print arm is designed to work in junction with the Rock automatic press. So it has a similar print arm style to where you can use a lot of the same platens from the Rock on your 350. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So
this is a good conversation to kind of bring up and segue into quickly here. We came out with the 350 about 6 months ago, and it's a great looking press. A lot of people are like, okay, what's the difference between this? I would say, so the main difference is going to be the size of screens and the size of platens. So we refer to it as auto ready, because you can use your Rock platens with this press. So it's also going to require that you use 23 by 31 screens. So the only time that I really recommend with people starting out with the 350, because the differences are so small, really, it's just the platens and the screens. I really only recommend it if they're thinking about going automatic within about a year or so with that. And for a few reasons, but mainly you're going to be required to use larger screens right out the gate.
Unless you have side clamps. If you have side
Unless-
clamps, you can use, you know, the 20 by 24 inches. You have a little more versatility, but
Right.
the back clamps, yeah, you have to have the bigger screens for sure. What else? So teaser, you know, thank you guys, one, for joining us on this one. We'll be a little bit more smooth next time with some more stuff planned out for you, but want to give you a teaser. You know, we want to have a more of these, you know. The next one, I think we're going to talk more about business tips, getting started. Luke will probably be a strong player in that since he's done a lot of side businesses with it. But yeah, stay tuned for that. We've got more even after that. So if there's anything that you really want to see, just reach out to us, send us an email, give us a call, and we'll try to find a time to fit that in.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you all. We'll get these questions answered as well for anyone who has existing questions. We'll get that taken care of. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye. We still